Hi, you're watching Goodfellas History. I'm one of your hosts, Garrett,
I'm Nick.
Davis.
and today I want to talk about this idea of a 4-day work week. So I kind of got the idea from watching the Rational Nationals video on uh, kind of the study in Iceland and how it found greater happiness and no loss in productivity. So I do have an article from NPR that I want to read from. Um, So basically, this started, there were two studies that took place between 2015 to 2019 um, that basically Iceland shortened its work week to 4 days, and I think it was, let me find it, sorry. Oh yeah, so it went from a 40-hour weekly schedule to 35 or 36-hour weekly schedules without a reduction in pay. The trials were launched after agitation from labor unions and grassroots organizations that pointed to Iceland's low rankings among its Nordic neighbors when it came to work-life balance. Um, and yeah, this so when you talk about who participated in the trials, it was kind of a variety of public and private sector jobs, included people in daycares, assisted living facilities, hospitals, museums, police stations, and Reykjavik government offices. So quite a mix of careers. And so participants reported back on how they reduced their hours. A common approach is to make meetings shorter and more focused. One workplace decided that meetings could be scheduled only before 3 p.m. Others replaced them altogether with email or other electronic correspondence. So, and that's kind of because I do have another article that I'm going to read from later. Meetings are kind of a big part of it. Uh, Basically, that, you don't need to have these many meetings or a lot of these meetings. And I've seen this like online too. People are like, this meeting could have just been an email. Like, why are we wasting all this time, you know, just having this meeting when it could just be an email? Um, but to continue on, some workers started their shifts earlier or later, depending on demand. For example, at a daycare, staff took turns leaving early as children went home. Offices with regular business hours shortened those hours, while some services were moved online. Um, some coffee breaks were shortened or eliminated. The promise of a shorter work week led people to organize their time and delegate tasks more efficiently, the study found. And working fewer hours resulted in people feeling more energized and less stressed. They spent more time exercising and seeing friends, which then had a positive effect on their work. And yeah, that shows it because the study found that there wasn't a loss of productivity. Uh, so that's kind of what I have for Iceland and for this article. So what are your guys' thoughts so far on that?
Love the idea of like for like day work weeks and not even just for like reduced hours and whatnot, but realistically, honestly, I almost feel like sometimes you don't need like case studies and whatnot to like almost intuitively understand certain things. Like obviously
Yeah.
getting like an extra day off, so getting around the same hours and whatnot, like of course people are generally going to be more receptive to that. That just makes sense to me, you know? Like it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I have a little bit more time where instead of just living to work, I'm kind of like working to live. It like kind of
Yes.
almost reverses that a little bit.
So
I
what?
think the study was honestly, sorry, real quick, Nick. I think the study honestly is more for the employers
Yes, I agree
because
with that.
obviously working, like having an extra day, if it's per week, that's 52 days a year that you're not at work. Of course, like no one's gonna be like, ugh, but it's
Hmm.
more for the employers because we have to give them a little bit more. And obviously they ask the question of productivity, but productivity stays the same or improves in some cases. Sorry, Nick.
So why do we have 5/8?
Why do we have 5/8? I'm
Why
gonna
is that?
get into that a little bit later,
But
but
but what was the why is that the standard?
well, so hold on, I can find it. We can go into it right now.
Yeah, let's
Well,
bust
we'll
into it.
we'll
I'm
we'll, we'll,
curious
we'll
about
we'll
this.
flow we'll flow with your thing, but I was gonna say that how many people actually work in factories now?
Honestly, like
Not
that's
that
like
many.
declining.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the reason why we have 5/8 is that was how factories were set up. And
Hmm.
since
Hmm.
most of the population, or at least a large proportion of the population, worked 5/8. Everywhere else in town accommodated that. And the reason why we have the 5/8 schedule is that it kind of associated with the factory time. So, I'll let you I'll let you keep to your flow, Garrett. I don't want to disrupt you. This is your time, and go.
Well, I don't have, honestly, this week I don't have like a very specific flow.
Yeah.
I'm just reading kind of just from these articles, so we can actually just go into that next.
Okay.
So this is from an shrm.org article talking about the phenomenon of a 4-day work week. It's a really long article, so we can, I'm sure throughout the rest of my segment I'll kind of be bouncing about. But we can kind of go down to, they have this section, the 8-hour myth, and then this leads to the history. So employers often bog down staff with unnecessary emails and meetings that keep them from accomplishing strategic goals. For example, employees spend 1.5 hours a day dealing with emails, and workers also have their own ways to drain the day. Their two biggest time-stealing activities are checking social media and reading news online, which take up about 2 hours a day, according to a study conducted in 2017 by VoucherCloud.com, a British discount shopping site. It found that employees are productive an average for 2 hours and 23 minutes a day. So that's kind of the beginning of that. Okay, so this is kind of where we start getting into the history. So considering the two greatest time-sucking options weren't even available when the 40-hour workweek was started nearly 100 years ago, it's easy to see why some companies may abandon the practice. In 1924, automotive tycoon Henry Ford adopted a 40-hour workweek because he thought his employees would buy more cars if they had more leisure time. Many worked 50 hours a week or previously. That's in parentheses. Many worked 50 hours a week or more previously. Other employers followed suit, and the 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday schedule was born. And then they do have this graphic that kind of shows from 1914 to 1940 kind of how that progressed, and I think it's really interesting, so I do want to read from that. So it's 20th century milestones on the path to the 40-hour work week. So you have in 1914, Henry Ford shifts from 9-hour to 8-hour days, though employees still work 6 days a week. And then it goes to 1918, Congress passes the Adamson Act, named after William Adamson, a U.S. representative from Georgia, establishing an 8-hour workday for all interstate rail workers to avoid a strike. And then you jump to 1924 to 1926, Ford moves to a 5-day work week, closing his factory on weekends. He believed that if workers had more leisure time, they would buy more products, including his cars, which we kind of talked about. And then in 1938, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, my king, signs the Fair Labor Standards Act, or FLSA, which mandates a federal standard for a 44-hour work week. The law also requires a minimum wage and overtime pay for those working more than 44 hours a week. And then you have 2 years later in 1940, the FLSA is updated to lower the federal standard to 40 hours a week. So that is the timeline to now how we have 40-hour work weeks today. And so it has been quite a significant amount of time us doing the same schedule with a lot of different things changing because, society isn't the same as it was back in 1940.
Like jobs alone are going to change and evolve as like technology does.
So it also, one of the things that I think you just hit on is that this was oftentimes adopted by the manufacturing industry, so industry production in their factories. Now, what would be interesting to see is what resources or what sources Henry Ford cited for why he moved to the 40-hour work week. It wasn't just that he thought it would give the employees more leisure time. It was also purported that this would be more efficient. One of the things that I think is really fascinating is that when you talk about this was the earliest days of what we can call academic psychology. And many of the earliest psychologists in the United States were behavioralists that believed that you could basically model employees based off of conditioning. So this is one of the reasons why, like, even if you look at our schools are 4/8s or 5/8s, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
We have breaks in those, and a lunch period. And you see how that's set up, so it's factory time. So what's really fascinating is that these behavioralists then took these concepts that they ascribed for factories and began to apply it in a general sense as the most efficient way, and that's the key word, is efficiency, way of structuring society. And that's one of the reasons why our school schedule is set up the way it is. So that's why, with incredibly complicated things like mathematics and sciences, you have the same amount of time with less complicated things like maybe art class. I mean, not saying that it's not complicated in that, you've got to work with it, but like theoretically complicated stuff, right? It's divided up by these hours, not for the efficiency, of education, but for the efficiency of time. So it's kind of one of the reasons why the United States, I think if you look at it historically speaking, never performed very well when it comes to our education. This is not a new phenomenon. It's largely due to the fact that we adopted this factory model. And one of the key innovators of this was a man by the name of Skinner. I think it's PF or BF Skinner. I would advise you guys to actually look this guy up. He was one of the leading behavioralists in the United States, and a lot of his theories were used by corporate America to rationalize their treatment of their employees. So
interesting.
So this is kind of how that alliance between the academy or academia and corporate America really kind of, helped screw over people, but also benefit people too. Like the 40-hour work week was way better than what it was, and a lot of these psychologists did rationalize that, if you give these people more time to rest and recover, they actually are more efficient employees. And it's from this behavioralism that that the idea of investment in employees actually came about. But
and so that's kind of just some of the history there. This is from like I said, a bigger article where it's just the phenomenon of the 4-day work week. A shorter work week could help businesses deal with the severe economic and health crisis stemming from the coronavirus pandemic. So this is from June of last year. But I do kind of want to touch on that too, that the pandemic kind of in a way put pressure on companies to be more flexible with their workers, like 4-day work weeks or working remotely. And so I kind of want to read just this beginning part. So it says, earlier this year, back before the coronavirus upended the world economy, so this is in 2019, New Zealander Andrew Barnes was promoting a book he co-authored that extols the benefits of the 4-day work week. The concept had been gathering steam after Barnes' company, Perpetual Guardian, as well as Microsoft Japan, made headlines announcing how such a schedule boosted productivity and increased employee satisfaction. Employers in a tight war for talent paid attention until the pandemic and subsequent recession changed the conversation. Now the idea is back, though for very different reasons. And so now I'm going to kind of get into, you have a lot of different countries kind of talking about this, so I kind of want to get into New Zealand here. So New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, I don't know if I'm saying that right, sorry, suggested that a 4-day work week could boost the country's economy. She believed that if individuals used long weekends to visit local spots, the activity could compensate for the lack of foreign travelers in a country that's heavily dependent on tourism. And as I'm sure you guys are aware, New Zealand was very, very strict on its COVID guidelines and its COVID kind of the steps that they took to mitigate the effects of the pandemic. And so I personally think that's a really great argument. I mean, it makes sense to me. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I mean, if you have, a drop in tourism, giving the population that lives there more time, I mean, I can't tell you the last time I went into downtown Salt Lake and spent money there, or even I go to Moab every now and then, but I do think that is a good argument to say,
So,
hey, to kind of, especially during a pandemic where we're losing the, tourism revenue, giving people here more time to then kind of go and spend their money and kind of make up for it.
so,
So do you want to know what one of the most effective ways of fighting the during the pandemic for the U.S. was? It was the checks that they sent out.
so
Yeah.
what we're really getting at here is the fact that New Zealand has to care about its workforce.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of immigration, and in order for those businesses and those industries in New Zealand to survive, they need to make sure that their workforce not only reproduces, you're going having kids, but they gotta want to be invested in the system. And so one of the things I really find fascinating right now was what's happening to the fast food industry. We're seeing a lot of now hiring signs staying up months on end.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for it is that these jobs don't pay very well. The coronavirus was a major financial hit to everybody. Like, except for the people that got bailed out, which was corporate America. The American people got a few checks, but instead of adopting a UBI that would have stabilized our economy and basically, I think, help people, actually normalize or standardize their living or stabilize their living, that didn't happen. And the same puritanical bullshit arguments of morality and work ethic and all the same horse shit that we've been hearing for the last 100 years was thrown out. And unfortunately, we did not have a lot of political leaders that galvanized around this as an opportunity. I mean, one of the very few was Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Who's, king right now. But I would say that what's fascinating about this is that we oftentimes forget about the psychological toll of labor. And unfortunately, what this study shows is that people who feel like they're less burdened by labor, less burdened by their work life, are probably going to be more happy. And when they actually go to work, after being able to breathe in more time, it's not as daunting. And it's just the psychological toll that it takes. I mean, just having a shorter work week when you've been conditioned to a longer one is going to naturally be a relief. So it's interesting. I think that this is probably something the U.S. should look at. Definitely, because I don't think it's going to affect... Most companies don't have the standard Monday through Friday work week anymore to begin with. And so, I think it's a way of stabilizing... Because putting on my Marxist hat, the reality is the employers are gonna try to exploit as much wealth and productivity from the employees as possible. But at a certain point, that is going to plateau unless you introduce technology to the scenario, and that's what's happened. But that plateau, ironically enough, kind of if you look at U.S. productivity, it's not a matter of just this. It's as technology goes along. And one of the reasons for that is that if you keep the same social environment with the same kind of psychological and physical tolls that people go through, naturally it's going to create the same kind of environment where people are apathetic.
Mm-hmm.
They're not interested in innovating their workplace. They're not interested in investing any more time or any more resources into their workplace because they don't feel appreciated and they feel overwhelmed. So...
Yeah. And I think you brought up... Oh, sorry, Davis, you go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say, and that makes sense. As I said, almost on an intuitive level, I think we understand that the more time and energy we have to consistently put into a workplace, every week or every day, is less time you're able to put into yourself outside of that as well. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, everyone's kind of working to live.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think when you brought up the whole UBI thing, this just kind of repopped in my head. I watched this video about the UBI, and basically, when you have a UBI that's being rolled out consistently, it essentially creates this 4-day work week or maybe even less because you have people when it comes to, being able to pay their bills and stuff, being like, I don't need to work 40 hours because now, my income is essentially being subsidized, by the government.
Mm-hmm.
I can take more time for myself. I can go down to part-time, still be getting paid the same or maybe even a little bit more to do my own thing. Like go back to school, be with my family,
Mm-hmm.
yada, yada. And so I think if the government were to roll out a UBI, I think it would kind of almost force companies to, because in essence, they're now kind of competing with the government, like, oh shit, if I'm very stingent or I'm very strict about you need to be here, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, I might lose, applicants.
So why do you think we don't do that to begin with? It's because the myth
Great
of the
question.
workplace. It's the myth of the workplace discipline.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys saw Donnie Deutsch on Morning Joe talk about soft American workers. But I
Oh,
advise
I
you
didn't
guys-
watch the video, but I did see that.
Heard about it as well. Yeah, I haven't
So,
watched the video though.
That right there is the perfect myth of the soft worker. That workers need to be disciplined. Workers need to be kept in their place because if left to their own devices, they're more likely to do stupid shit, or they're just soft. They need to get hard. It's tough times, so we gotta get hard again. It's like no. What this goes down to is that there is a knee-jerk response amongst the managerial class in this country. And it's because many of these people have been tempered in the fire of corporate bullshit. That if the workplace is not disciplined, and if the labor force is not disciplined, then we're going to somehow go back to the 1970s, where labor is just going to keep rioting and nothing's going to get done. When in reality, the leash that corporate America has over their workers is so absolute due to the environment that we have right now that the only thing the workers can do is do a half-assed job at work.
Yeah.
And right now, one of the things is that the very economic reality that exists right now, due to COVID, has basically completely disempowered corporate America in this because they have no means of disciplining labor. Because they need labor, but labor doesn't need them right now.
Yeah.
So it's forcing a lot of these corporations to have to change their policies. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. I really hope this 4-day work week gets traction. Because, let's really be honest. Once again, this is the capitalist class shooting itself in the foot because it lacks the imagination and the ability to understand that a small hit to their bottom line right now is really not going to affect their bottom line a week from now. They're still going to be able to exploit... Because, does McDonald's make its money off of its food?
No.
Basically a real estate venture.
No. Neither does Taco Bell. Neither do most of these corporations. Most of these corporations don't make most of their profits based off of the profits from sale. They make their money off of playing games in the stock market. So these attitudes and these policies are reinforced because stockholders believe that is the best way of maintaining an efficient company and keeping the chips that they have control over. If you want to think of corporations as blue chips, they don't want their blue chips to turn into red chips. So a disciplined labor force is what's necessary. That's the only reason why. There's no reason why employees need to be treated the way that they are, other than corporate America and primarily the shareholders that dominate corporate America believe that employees need to be treated this way. It's psychological. Yeah. It's all about it's all about enforcing an aesthetic, enforcing an aristocratic worldview down people's throats that the wise ones and the most capable must keep the rabble in line. When Davis pointed out that it's just intuitive. If people have more time to rest, more time with their family, more time to live their life, they are far more willing...
And in general, just pursue things that interest them.
Yeah, they're far more willing to invest time and resources in their job without the expectation of getting a pay raise or more wealth. Most people don't work jobs as a way of maximizing every single percentage of wealth they possibly can from the company.
Yeah.
Most people have a job as a means of paying their bills so that they can live.
Yeah.
So there's a huge disconnect between the psychological outlook of your lay American and these hedge fund managers and these Wall Street tycoons. And this is also one of the reasons why like FDR and the New Dealers wanted to decouple Wall Street from this position of power in corporate America, because they're making really stupid fucking decisions constantly that threaten our economy based on short-term gains and short-term benefits. They really don't help anybody.
Yeah. And what you were saying too about it, so it's intuitive, because, who doesn't want another day off? And then the studies have shown that when it comes to productivity, it either stays the same or productivity increases. So it's honestly a win-win scenario for the workers and the employers. And you also have that, I have this here in the article too, companies that used, such a schedule saved a total of 92 billion pounds or $120 billion as operating costs dropped, absenteeism fell, and productivity rose.
Yeah.
According to a 2019 study of 500 British businesses, 500 British business leaders by the Henley Business School at the University of Reading in England.
Having those days off makes a huge difference. Like it gets back, and I keep using the word psychology because this is really it. I mean, let's really be honest. Most of our jobs are not as physically demanding as they were, but they're just as mentally and emotionally demanding as they've been. And I would argue that they become far more emotional and mentally demanding as time has gone on. And the reason for it is that, this gets to another issue of sociological issues. Our society is becoming increasingly Adamsonized to the point where, there's no bowling leagues, there's nobody doing, 30, 40 years ago, we'd all be playing, in a baseball team, a company baseball team. We'd all be involved in, we'd have outside pursuits that we'd be involved with. And sometime in the 1980s, in the 1990s, late 80s, early 90s, some brilliant jack-off, due to, the belief in globalization, figured out that it would be incredibly intelligent to have a graveyard shift and keep factories open 24/7. And productivity did go up, because, you're now manufacturing longer. But once again, it did this. It went up, and then it stagnated. And the reason why it stagnated was because the employees that got fucked over from that change have no reason. They have no incentive to invest more time and more energy into the company than what is necessary. That's the thing. I mean, the reality is, psychologically speaking, people who work a job know that work sucks. Everybody knows that. Jobs suck. We need them. We can love the people that we work with, but jobs suck. You're expected to do A, and if you don't do A, then you get yelled at. It's just what it is. Sometimes it's hard to do A. Sometimes there's a lot of things going on. But
well, and can we also talk about, too, this is just, we're talking a lot about just having one job.
Mm-hmm.
Now, since, minimum wage hasn't increased for, 16 years or something like that, and, cost of living is going up, people are having to get two jobs, sometimes a second, even full-time job. And that, I couldn't even imagine, because I did have two jobs at one point, but it was one full-time, one part-time. And honestly, I didn't even have to. And the second that I, was kind of sick of it, I quit that shit out. But a lot of people can't.
Yeah.
So it's that burnout is just times, I wouldn't even say double, probably times 10 when you have two full-time jobs.
And furthermore, as not only technology has advanced and whatnot, but we've also begun to see in polling and like data that people nowadays are reportedly more lonely. Mm-hmm. They don't socialize as often as well. So I feel like this would be almost kind of bridge that gap a little bit, because people would be able to do other things.
So really important. The last time that the minimum wage was increased was in 2007. It was 2008. I was there. I remember getting my minimum wage increase, and I also remember shortly thereafter my services were no longer required. So, was it because I was so fucking expensive? No. It was because the company that I was working for, Sears, made a brilliant move in the middle of, or the beginning of a recession, to basically purge all their employees that would be, receiving that minimum wage increase due to their time working at a said company, because I'd be making more than minimum wage, because I had been there for a certain amount of time. So they decided to purge all those people as a way of maintaining costs. Sears is a perfect example of a company, of a corporation, that allowed this stockholder mindset to dictate their behavior to oblivion. They don't exist anymore. They're a failed company. And the reality is, and this is one of the things that really frustrates me, is have the Democratic Party lionized a minimum wage increase every year from the recession on, I think that they would have maintained power.
Yeah, I agree.
And the reason for it is just simple calculus. It's simple math, guys. Like, things got way more expensive between 2008 and 2010. And it wasn't because the value of the dollar shifted. It was because purchasing power of the United States plummeted. So we had a deflationary scale. We had deflation. Basically, to this day, we still have deflation, where people's purchasing power have fallen off a cliff. And the reason why it's fallen off a cliff is not because the value of the dollar has gone up and down. It's because access to credit has evaporated. And so the reason why the 90s were the roaring 90s wasn't because everybody was making really great money. Is that people were making money, but they also had access to a lot of liquidity due to credit. This is one of the reasons why, if you look at the late 90s and early 2000s, credit debt was becoming a bigger issue. And surprise, surprise, people in the early 2000s were able to predict that eventually there was going to be a credit crisis in this country. I mean, I don't know what to tell you guys, but I remember, like, just before the recession took place, I got a job working at Sears. The moment I got that job, do you know how many credit card offers I got after that? I couldn't even open up the mailbox because of how stuffed my mailbox was for credit card offers for me. How many credit card offers do you guys get now?
Gosh, maybe like one every like 2 months or so, if that.
So, yeah,
This is not a defense of credit so much as a point that the reason why the good times were good in the 90s was largely an illusion. It was because people had access to cheap credit. Interest rates were low. People were able to use credit to buy a lot of things, and they were able to offset their costs. So, I mean, getting back to the 4-hour work week, the reason why this is really important is that hopefully a shift is beginning to happen where people are beginning to understand, it's not the labor theory of value, it's the theory of labor value.
Yeah.
Labor matters. We need to have people who want to be productive, who want to work. And a lot of these companies are really screwed right now because they're not able to get the labor power that they need to maximize their profits. And it's because we've spent the last 50 years basically depicting workers as either Archie Bunker or some of the most laziest form of welfare queens. Highly racialized, highly stigmatized. There's no way of providing any kind of stabilization for you. And what this COVID crisis did is it pulled a lot of people who were doing okay down to the ground. A lot of businesses went under. A lot of the very same Tea Party types got kicked in the balls and were on their knees. I mean, this is one of the reasons why most of the people that were actually at the Capitol Hill insurrection were small business owners, people with money. They were scared shitless because in reality, their worldview has been fundamentally challenged because of this. And there's no way out of it unless we make some major systemic changes. $15 minimum wage coupled with a 4-hour work week, I think would be enough to entice a lot of people to come work for your company. Because then, yeah, I'm working and making more money. I have more free time. It will also solve other sociological issues. Because guess what? It means that there's going to be more parents at home with their kids. There's going to be more interaction between kids and their parents. It's going to feel the boot on people's necks is going to be lifted.
Yeah.
You want to know why people are going nuts right now? Is that they feel that there's no escape. They feel trapped. And human beings are animals. If you put a human being in a corner, how dangerous are they?
Yeah.
Oh, exceptionally.
And a lot of people feel like that. So this gets to my point with the Capitol Hill riot. A lot of these people were cornered people. Now, I don't agree with what they did. It's still fucking treason in my mind. But that fear, that anxiety, is real. And the reality is the Republican Party and the Democratic Party really aren't offering them any way out. The fascists are the only ones offering them anything. And that's incredibly dangerous. And this is one of the things that gets me frustrated with the left. These people represent an influential, large part of our society. And I feel a lot of them, if offered resources or ways out of their predicament, using left-wing ideology, they might actually start turning towards us. Because guess what? That's what happened in the New Deal.
Yeah.
A lot of these people were New Dealers. And it's because they got squeezed. And it's because of monopoly power. Like, in my segment that we're getting ready to do, I'm going to talk about the fact that, I'll get to it then, but the reality is, one of the underlying problems is the problem of monopoly power. And a lot of people misunderstand monopoly. When you guys think of monopoly power, how much power do you think a monopoly company has in a given market? How much power do you think they need to have monopoly power in a market?
I mean, it really does kind of vary, because right now it's argued that we already have a few current ones at this moment, just because they're now built too big to be, like, technically speaking, fail. Like, the government has to step in and bail them out, otherwise we risk, like, possible collapses in some markets.
But how much percentage of the market do you think they need to control to have monopoly power?
Oh, I wouldn't think they'd need that much, honestly.
How about you, Garrett? Just spitball a percentage out.
A percentage of how much they need to control the market?
Yeah, to be a monopoly power.
90%.
No. Not even close.
Yeah.
Davis, how about you?
Say 10%.
You're closer. Some of these markets, all it requires is somewhere between 5 to 6% to have monopoly power.
Wow.
I'm just like, I'm just saying, like, how they're, like, structurally built and, like, implemented. That would make sense.
Yeah.
Because it's about supply chains. Yeah, go ahead, Garrett.
Oh, sorry. I just think we're kind of maybe getting off on a little bit of a tangent.
I know.
So just to kind of bring it back, I have kind of one more kind of thing I want to talk about, and then maybe we can wrap it up.
Yeah.
So there was a study from this FlexJobs 2019 annual survey, surveyed workers and basically showed the appeal of flexible work schedules. So 30% of workers reported leaving a job because it did not offer flexible work options. 74% of workers said that work-life balance is a top factor when evaluating a job. 45% of respondents say they were interested in working in an alternative work schedule. And 80% of employees said that they would be more loyal to their employers if they had flexible work options. And that, coupled with the fact that, millennials are now kind of the largest group in the workforce, and they, when you poll them, they are very interested in flexible work schedules and this 4-day work week. And so I think this is something that is going to happen more and more as, we have more studies done, more pressure. But I do kind of want to talk about, because obviously all jobs can't, you have these companies where you're in an office looking at a computer, they can close down another day if they wanted to. Yeah. The job that we work in, we can't close on any day. And so you do have these, these careers and these jobs that can't really do a 4-day work week. But in my mind, and again, maybe you guys can correct me if I'm not really seeing this right, is if you have more and more places and more kind of career paths moving to the standard of a 4-day work week to be competitive so that you have applicants though that like to kind of appeal to them, you would, have higher wages,
Mhm.
have better insurance, have, you know what I mean? And so I do think that implementing a 4-day work week, even just for those who can do it, will benefit those who can't,
Yeah,
just kind of in that regard.
my argument would be for companies that wouldn't be able to, like say healthcare or even like
Yeah.
auto repairs.
Law
Oftentimes, like
enforcement.
you have like yeah, like you realistic. I also think like banking should be a little more flexible, but that's besides the point. But I
Yeah.
just think
Or
like
just
certain things
wages.
where it's like
Mhm.
structural like needs for like societies and whatnot,
Yeah.
you just have to incentivize in other ways to that
Free
So
point.
childcare, like, you
it
know what
get,
I mean?
Hmm.
it gets
And
back
so
to
I,
it gets back to what I was originally saying about the factory manufacturing being such a dominant part of our economy, and how it kind of forced the rest of society to condition itself to it, so that we have these 5/8s. So in reality, the truth of the matter is that hospitals can do, 4-day work weeks. They just have to be more flexible on who they have, where they have it. But it also require policy changes and enforcement from the top down to get it to work.
mhm.
Because I mean, there's, in all honesty, like just for what we do, like we can't have nobody here on a Friday because we're
Yeah,
a trauma one hospital, right?
yeah,
But we can condition an environment where we can have a 4-day work week for our employees. It'll just require shifts and changes on days off. It'll just require a fundamental change in how the hospital operates. It's possible,
yeah.
but it's going to require a lot more leverage than
Or
say like a
even,
McDonald's.
yeah, or even if, because, real quick, 'cause I just brought up an excellent example. So, um, Killer Visual Strategies, a Seattle-based communications agency, kind of put an unorthodox twist on solving the common business challenge of employee fatigue resulting from a company growth spurt. So basically, what they did is they cut the work week down to 4 days, and they hired more people. And so, but so they were just kind of the president and the chief creative officer said they saw people expressing signs of burnout, and so they wanted to kind of fight that. But what they saw was that their productivity increased by 20%.
Yeah.
So when it comes to even just in a place that we work, if the studies show an increase in productivity, I feel like that can what's the word I'm looking for? It can be
An
it can
incentive.
kind of affirm the choice to hire more people because if you're seeing a 20% increase in productivity,
Yeah, that's
I feel like you
impressive.
can definitely afford more people. And so then even for jobs where you need to have people there all the time, maybe that can just be the, kind of the solution to also move to this new standard is you can hire more people because then you see these increases in productivity. So,
Nice.
yeah. All right. Do we want to kind of wrap it up? Do you guys
Mm-hmm.
have any final thoughts?
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, yeah, go ahead, Nick.
I really hope that we are able to get something like this. I think that the mental health of our country definitely needs to increase because I think that with this, and if people feel valued, I mean, that's something I really wasn't able to really express. If people feel valued and they feel like their work matters and they feel like they're contributing to society, they're more likely to invest in it. They'll care more about it because they'll have skin in the game. And this is it's a real problem. Like, so mental health issues in this country have spiked since this recession, and since even COVID. And I think that it just makes rational sense. It really doesn't disrupt capitalism all that much to do these things. Employees are still going to be exploited for their labor, but I mean, like, at least you can like give people some fun or at least some benefit out of life if you're gonna do that. Because otherwise, people are going to turn to these fascists who offer them that relief, who offer them the enemy that they need to slay to have a better life. And that's what's dangerous.
And I guess for me, how I look at it as well is, especially with what the pandemic has highlighted, like as I said, we've seen a lot more people are isolated. We've seen spikes in like the suicide rates. We've seen just spikes in depression and just like a social anxiety as well. I just feel that like not even just with the 4-day work weeks and whatnot, but like we've seen just the effectiveness of like UBI potential. We've seen the effectiveness of 4-day work weeks. Like we're seeing data and whatnot showing that, hey, if we implement a little bit more into like the social like norms and whatnot, we can do a lot of good to counteract all of this. So just something like things to consider on that. We need to learn to be experimental.
Yeah.
And trust each other.
Yeah, I agree. And I just think that when it comes to, a 4-day work week and free college and, Medicare for all, and those things like that those things really enrich our society. I mean, even just those three, like, I just want, people to think about how much more just happier our, country could be. We could probably get up there in the top 5 of like the happiness index, and, we can, send the message to people that like, your government actually gives a shit about you, and like your company actually gives a shit about your mental health. And I think that's just so important, and I think that that's definitely the step that we need to take moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And
You can't have communism without community.
yeah, that's true. All right, well, this has been Goodfellas History. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. See ya.
Bye, guys!
Bye, guys.